Welcome, everyone. Glad you are here. Again, welcome, everyone. My name is Chuck Warpahusky. I am the director here at Michigan Collaborative to End Mass Incarceration. And we are here to talk about the budget. How do we make sure that programs that help prevent incarceration, support rehabilitation, and keep people safe after they come home, how do we make sure that those have the funding necessary to be successful? Just to give you the quick overview, I'm going to say a couple words at top and then quickly hand the mic over to Jessica Zimnelman from State Appellate Defender Office talking about juvenile life or resentencing. Cassie will follow up talking about funding the Sentencing Commission, and Brad will close us up talking about making sure that the prison education programs, both college and vocational, are adequately funded. That should leave plenty of time for question and answer from you all, and we should get you out of here by noon. So for those of you who don't know my SEMI, our job is to support the folks like you who are on the front lines of the movement to end mass incarceration. Whether you're a direct service provider, whether you're an advocacy organization, whether you're a faith-based or business leader, we know we're stronger when we stand together. And that's especially important right now because a lot of folks have been feeling very depressed, very forlorn about the chance for change right now. And I get it. I'm not trying to to deny anybody's grief that they're feeling about the current political moment. But as we look at this budget situation overall, I think it's important to remember we can make a difference. There are 20,000 fewer people in Michigan prisons today than there were 20 years ago. And that's because of strong policy work, advocacy, and fighting by people like you to change our approach to the prison system. Um, if you adjust the spending, since we're here talking about budgets, that's $1 billion less that we're spending each year, adjusted for inflation because of this work. And that's $1 billion that can go into education, that can go into drug treatment, that can go into violence prevention and victim services. And Dennis would like to see if even more of that money that's still in there is spent on reentry services. We all would, but more before this work started, almost no money was going into reentry services and programming, and that portion of the pie has grown significantly. So we can make a difference. We have made a difference, and even more recently, last year when we were looking at budget stuff, there were proposed massive cuts to the prison food and healthcare system. That was one of the things that we were able to pull together folks like you and stand up and say no to those. Not only did we win to push back against those proposed cuts, I was ready. I thought they were going to come at them again this year. They didn't even try. This is an indication that when we stand together, we can make a difference. Last year, we did see some cuts to community-based reentry funding, but we were able to push back against the worst of the cuts. And again, thought they were going to swing at it again this year. They didn't even try. So when we stand together, when we fight, we can win. And so that's all to set up the three people, our panelists, who are going to talk about. There's a lot that's in the budget we could fight on, but we've identified three priority issues that we really want to make sure get addressed as the House, Senate, and Governor do their budget negotiations: juvenile life for resentencing, the Sentencing Commission, and prison education. So I'm going to pass the mic over to Jessica Zimbelman from SADO to talk to us about the juvenile life for resentencing. Jessica.
Hi, everybody. As Chuck said, my name is Jessica Zimmelman. I'm the Deputy Director of the Public Defender Division at SADO. And many of you might know that we're actively engaged in getting kids and young adults resentenced for crimes that they committed when they were 20 or under. The Michigan Supreme Court in April of last year, April of 2025, extended the holding of Miller, which prohibited mandatory life without parole for kids 17 and under. The Michigan Supreme Court extended that to ages 18, 19, and 20. So that was about 800 additional people who were entitled to resentencing in Michigan. Now, the prosecutors can, and we know have, continued to seek life without parole sentences for certain individuals. And when that happens, there needs to be extensive Miller hearings, which are very akin to death penalty mitigation hearings. So the defense are calling experts, psychologists, a lot of different experts to testify about our clients. Right now, there are about 220 people who are entitled to resentencing in Michigan who don't have lawyers. So it is a budget priority to have SADO's juvenile lifer unit funded on a permanent basis because we also know that these take years. Michigan had the second highest population of juvenile lifers entitled to resentencing after the decisions in Miller. We had about 400 people, 17 and under. Some of those are still ongoing. And Miller was made retroactive 10 years ago in the Montgomery case. So these resentencing proceedings for an additional 800 folks, 18 to 20 years old, also could take years. So it is a budget priority to get these folks resentenced and get lawyers for them because, like we said, we still have about a third of the population as 19 and 20-year-olds who don't even have lawyers yet. And we know that we have many of you might be familiar with our Project Reentry team, who does a lot of comprehensive reentry planning and parole interventions for our clients who are being resentenced. And we have really seen with that proper preparation for folks to come home that it can improve public safety by and result in cost savings to the state through corrections cost savings. So there is a return on investment from a dollars perspective, but also, of course, for a human perspective, to bring people home to the communities where they can be active members of their community instead of being incarcerated on these unconstitutionally long sentences.
Thank you, Jessica. Any questions for Jessica before she heads off? What is the amount you hope to get? Is there any money at all for this besides what you want?
I don't know off the top of my head, honestly, what we have asked for when we did our budget proposal. Right now, in last budget cycle, we got 1 year funding for the 19 and 20-year-olds, and we're hoping to have that at least continued. Thanks, everybody.
I'm dropping in the chat now what the House Fiscal Agency analyzed from the juvenile lifer resentencing from last year. There was $2.4 million in the executive, and it's gone to zero in the House. We have a constitutional mandate that these sentencings to take place, and the House, largely for political posturing reasons, has decided that the best approach is to ignore the mandate of the judiciary and not fund these sentencing efforts. The last thing I will say to support the great work that Cassie and Safe and Just are doing to support the Sentencing Commission is for a lot of the other sentencing campaigns we're looking at, having a functioning sentencing commission would make a tremendous difference. One of the things that was a disappointment during the previous trifecta was the inability to get a broader resentencing bill passed, a second look bill passed. If we're able to take a close look at our existing sentencing guidelines, find out what were excessive sentences, adjust those down, it becomes easier then to go back for future sentences to say, hey, this person was over sentenced, the punishment was too severe, and we know that because we ran the numbers, this is what the Sentencing Commission came down to. Let's take a look back. So this opens up the door not just to new cases, but it'll potentially to help make it easier for people who are currently incarcerated to be able to fight for resentencing pathways for them as well. And we're going to move next from talking about resentencing, make sure that people who were not given a constitutional sentence at the time of their first conviction because the brain science around that wasn't fully considered have a chance to get resentenced and hopefully come home and be supportive in that. But these unconstitutional sentences for young and emerging adults is just one part of the problem that our sentencing faces in Michigan. And Safe and Just Michigan has been one of the leading organizations trying to fix that. So Cassie from Safe and Just Michigan is going to share about the efforts to fund the Sentencing Commission and how that will give us a long-term pathway to make sure that we've got data-driven, stakeholder-involved sentencing across the board. So Cassie, we'll get the spotlight to you.
Thank you so much, Chuck, and thank you everyone for being on this call. Um, you know, to talk about budgets is very difficult, and I was trying to figure out how to discuss sort of the issues with regards to the Sentencing Commission. And, sort of here's what I came up with. So, how many of you would trust the work of a plumber if you had a leak, who said they fixed the leak, but never ran water through the pipe to check to see if the leak was fixed. And that's kind of how we treat criminal legal sentencing laws in Michigan. There's no formal automatic feedback loop that the legislature has to let them know whether the laws they passed have the intended effect. Um, an example of this is um, a project that we worked on, a couple of years ago, and I'll tell you a little bit about it. In 2019, Michigan passed legislation with regards to medically frail parole. And this was a law that would allow incarcerated Michiganders who were terminally ill and near the end of life, and more importantly, no longer a threat to public safety, to be paroled to live out the rest of their lives, in the community. And so in 2023, our organization checked on the law's progress. We were not asked to do this officially. We didn't have to, but we are interested in life and long sentences. And so we looked into it. And what we found out was that since the law was enacted, only one person was able to take advantage of it. So the law was not working the way that it intended. And armed with that information, we were able to go back to the legislature, say, hey, look, you passed this law. It was a great idea. In practice, it's not doing what it's supposed to because only one person has been able to take advantage of it. And we were able to get the law revised. The Sentencing Commission is an advisory body attached to the legislature, and their sole role is to look at Michigan sentencing guidelines and its laws to determine whether they are accomplishing what it is that they were set out to do. They are that feedback loop. And unfortunately, this budget cycle, they're in trouble. So we have in the budget process, the governor, sets out sort of what she thinks the budget should look like. The House will determine what they think the budget should look like, and the Senate will do the same. And then they negotiate, and eventually at the end of this process, we have one state budget. In all of those versions of the budget that's out there that's being negotiated, there's a placeholder for the funding for the Sentencing Commission. An unfunded Sentencing Commission is no commission at all. In Michigan, we spend too much time, too much money, too many lives and human potential are wasted, are basically languishing in prison. And granted, these are people who have done horrible things and have made mistakes in life, but they are not all a threat to public safety and are ready to give back to their families and their communities. Yet, our legislature right now, if we were to ask them to prove that whatever particular law, habitual offense enhancements are working the way that they intended, are making the public safer, is reducing crime, those are things that they could not tell us. They can't even tell us if the law is being applied fairly across the state. Unless somebody tells them, they have no way of knowing. So we need the Sentencing Commission so that we have that body, that feedback loop to tell the legislature if what they are intending to happen when they pass legislation is actually happening. We need to remind them, and especially our allies, that the Sentencing Commission is important. They need about $750,000 annually to do their work. Now, if you consider how much that is in terms of the whole budget, I mean, the whole state budget, when all is said and done, is probably going to be over $80 billion. This is less than a rounding error. But that $750,000 every year is an investment in evidence-based legislation. And it is an investment in public safety. So what we're doing and what we would like for you all to help us do is to, talk to, particularly our allies and let them know that we value the Sentencing Commission and that we want to see laws that are based on evidence, facts, and data, and not, you know, someone's or anyone's gut feeling. Yes, so the sentencing, they're asking for about at least $750,000 annually. We would prefer 1 million, but $750,000 is at least enough to fund most of the work. How long has the commission been active? The commission is it's new, but it's not really. We used to have a commission and then it went away. And so um, it was sort of restarted and retitled in 2024. So last year that we had, we were able to get money into the budget for the Sentencing Commission. But it's not sort of something that is ongoing in perpetuity. So we have to ask every year.
And the first meeting, so this is one of the key wins that we did have during the previous, not this current legislative cycle, but the previous one where there was the Democratic trifecta. We had a lot of disappointments over things that were to the finish line, but we couldn't get over the finish line. The Sentencing Commission was one of those key wins in 2024. We had it funded in 2025. Their first meeting was just a couple weeks ago this year. And as we look at the places where Michigan sentences are excessive, where they're outliers across the country, this is one of those areas for the long term that helps us change that trajectory so that we can get a sentencing guidelines that are appropriate, that are aligned with the data, and are not excessive so that we're not wasting lives and wasting money.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. So our third speaker is Brad Warner from Humanity for Prisoners. Uh, yes, we want to be able to make sure that people who are currently incarcerated with unconstitutional sentences can be resentenced, that we can fix our sentencing guidelines so that folks aren't doing more time than is necessary. And we want to make sure that when people come home ready to and want to get that job, get that apartment, rebuild their lives, they're coming home ready, that they've had the education and training to be successful when they come back to the community. It's been part of Brad's personal story, and it's also part of what we need to make sure there's funding for this year in the budget. So, Brad, talk to us about prison education.
Thank you, Chuck, and thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Brad Warner, and I'm with Humanity for Prisoners in Grand Haven on the west side of the state. I'm going to talk about a budget issue that I believe has significant fiscal and human implications in Michigan. My perspective on this issue is rooted in 33 years of lived experience in the Michigan Department of Corrections, ironically enough, as a former juvenile lifer. In that context, I can say with unwavering certainty that education fundamentally altered the course of my own life. I participated in college programs while incarcerated, and upon my release in 2024, I continued that pursuit, recently graduating from Adams State University and transitioning into Calvin University's Applied Leadership Program. Right now, lawmakers in Lansing are negotiating the state budget. And some of the proposals on the table include severe cuts to higher education and vocational training programs. Specifically, current proposals intend to cut $850,000 from higher education and prison, a cut also reflected in the governor's and Senate budgets, and slash another $940,300 from education, skilled trades, and career readiness programs. From a strictly objective, strategic standpoint, cutting these programs is illogical. It hurts taxpayers, it makes our communities less safe, and it compromises the security of MDOC correctional facilities. Let's start with the fiscal reality. Data from the Vera Institute of Justice clearly show that individuals who participate in post-secondary education programs while incarcerated have 48% lower odds of returning to prison. 48%. Because of the substantial reduction in recidivism, every dollar invested in prison-based education ultimately saves the state roughly $4 to $5 in long-term incarceration and public safety costs. Vocational training offers a similarly powerful return. A recent Mackinac Center policy brief confirmed these programs deliver an exceptionally high return on investment. By equipping individuals with specialized trades, we significantly improve their odds of securing stable, well-paying employment after release. And whatever you think about what people did to get to prison, gainful employment is one of the strongest buffers against reoffending. When the state slashes these budgets, it is not saving money. It is simply shifting an inflated cost to the back end. We are essentially replacing proactive, proven investments with guaranteed long-term expenses with higher recidivism, expanded court dockets, and reincarceration. The data present a clear fiscal case, but numbers only outline the framework. The actual return on investment occurs at the individual level. I recently spoke with several formerly incarcerated individuals who completed these programs, and their experiences illustrate exactly how these statistics play out in real life. Consider the impact of the MDOC's vocational village. My friend Nate earned his commercial driver's license through that program. It gave him a pathway to a career with a highly competitive salary, effectively removing the economic desperation that often leads to crime. But it went deeper than a paycheck for Nate. He told me, and I'm quoting him here, I learned a lot about discipline and just having a drive to want something better in life, not just for me, but for the sake of my children, my family, and my community. Similarly, Kyle enrolled in the electrical program at Vocational Village. He entered the system with no real skills, and he explained that this program dismantled the common assumption that all legitimate opportunities disappear for a convicted felon. Seeing a real pathway to a career was, in his words, a big motivator. It was a motivator that shifted his mindset away from just getting by and toward building an above-board, sustainable, and respectable life. Higher education produces a similar internal shift. Sean, a graduate of the Calvin Prison Initiative, is now a doctoral student and a church pastor. Think about that. In our conversation, Sean emphasized that education equips individuals to think critically about their decisions. He noted, and I'm quoting him here, it allows you to engage in civil discourse, which is invaluable in the reentry process. Sean stressed that higher education develops a capacity for logical, nonviolent communication, which directly enhances community safety. Mike, another Calvin Prison Initiative graduate and currently an addiction counselor, articulated the core differences that these programs make. He explained that prison education operates on two tracks: informing people and transforming people. According to Mike, true education transforms from within. He added, and I'm quoting him here: education provides that rich framework to understand yourself in relation to others and the broader world. Without that framework, individuals are often left with what Mike calls a profoundly self centered criminal mindset characterized by an entitlement mentality that the world owes them a debt. In Mike's experience and opinion, education replaces that dangerous entitlement mentality with a mindset of accountability and purpose. So, having said all that, in short, allowing a nearly $1.8 million in cuts to prison education and vocational programs is a short sighted fiscal decision with long lasting negative consequences down the road. It undermines public safety, increases future taxpayer burdens, and strips away the very tools that enable individuals to reenter society successfully and permanently. For these reasons, we hope all of you can help prevent these cuts from happening, and I'm happy to answer any questions anybody might have on this.
Thank you, Brad. Really appreciate everything you shared there. And I love that framework about how education is both informing and transforming. That's a great framework there. Any questions for Brad? WDT recently had an interview from the coordinator for the Wayne State College and Prison program, a formerly incarcerated person himself who's helping support that program, and he shared about how transformative the program was as well. So there's two elements of this budget. The college and prison program is one part of it. Last year, there were two line items that funded college and prison. There was a $1.25 million recurring expenditure, and that's been continued. All three budgets are maintaining that recurring expenditure. We were worried it was going to get cut, but that one's been able to be maintained. There was also an $850,000 one-time expenditure because as they're getting these programs set up, there's a lot of initial costs to get them up and running. That funding was not continued in any of the three budgets. And so on the college side, that is what we're fighting for. On the vocational and career readiness side, the funding was cut by about $940,000, just shy of $1 million cut from that vocational and career readiness programming. I can pull up the numbers on how much was that's out of in a moment. But again, as Cassie indicated at the beginning, for the scale of the overall state budget, these are not major these are not big asks, and they're big asks that have tremendous return on investment in terms of public safety, recidivism prevention, and reducing long-term costs. Dennis is also asking in the chat, do we have data on the number percent of people who get jobs in their area of training from the village? Great question, Dennis. This is something so just let me step back to make sure everybody's following along here. One of the programs that the Department of Corrections has initiated and really takes a lot of pride on is what's called the Vocational Village. The Vocational Village programs include a combination of vocational training efforts as well as changes to how the sort of prison experiences in terms of scheduling, supervision, other things. So there's a number of pieces that come together, including parole. When you talk to the vocational village principals at the educational programs, they'll say, oh yeah, the parole agents who work with our graduates know not to bother somebody at work, which every parole agent should know that. It shouldn't be a special thing for vocational village graduates, but that's how it is. The department has not released data about how many of those vocational village certificates in things like construction trades, automotive repair, CNC operator. There's not good data about how many of people get a career in that specific field. And so that is an ongoing challenge. So whether it's specifically through Vocational Village or through the other vocational programs that are at MDOC, definitely getting better tracking on what are the data, what are the careers that people are actually finding employment, et cetera, is going to be really important. And also, one of the questions that we've been pushing the department for to be able to get data on and haven't been able to get there is, are there disparities either in terms of the theoretical or the potential career compensation levels for the different programs based on gender? So, for example, the women's Huron Valley facility has a cosmetology program. They have a horticulture program. How much money do those programs actually generate compared to the CNC and auto mechanics programs that are at the men's facilities? Some of those high-tech, high-demand programs are at the Huron's Valley, but we don't have the data on what's either happening in terms of the theoretical wage power that people are getting, or in terms of, as Dennis asks, what people are actually getting when they enter the job market. Let's go back and answer that important question that here about what can we do. So Cassie alluded to it, that the way the budget process works is the governor makes her budget recommendations, the Senate passes a budget proposal, the House passes a budget proposal, and then there needs to be a negotiation among those three budgets. And so that's what we're talking about, is in this final budget negotiation process. We've got a page on our website that has a lot of the details. I'll drop the link in the chat here in just a moment. And on that page, we have a quick take action form that will write a letter to your senator and representative asking for them to support these three budget asks. The truth is about action in general, it's whether you're doing civic action or whether you're doing your own fitness stuff, the more effort you put in, the better results you get. So doing that click to action, that matters. It matters when lawmakers see those letters from their constituents lifting up certain pieces. But we'd really encourage you to pick up the phone and call directly to your lawmakers, to your specific representatives, as well as, I didn't have this slide in it before, but there are we've got again, it's that three-party negotiation. The governor and her office is one part of it. The Senate is a second part of it. And in the Senate, Senator Sarah Anthony from the Lansing area is the lead negotiator on it. And Senator Sue Schenck from the Ann Arbor area is the senator who is the chair of the Corrections and Judiciary Subcommittee. So a lot of the stuff that we cover, it's Senator Sarah Anthony and Senator Sue Schenck that are leading the negotiations. On the House side, the chair of the House Appropriations process is Representative Ann Boleyn from the Brighton area. And on the Corrections and Judiciary Subcommittee, it's Bradley Slaw from the Zeeland-Hudsonville, out on the west side of the state. So it's useful for them to hear from you, hear stories like the ones that Brad shared about the lived impact of these programs that are up for cuts. And if you've got friends in those areas, especially in the Brighton and Zeeland areas, where a lot of the House budget, where a lot of these things aren't funded, that's where it's important to get some of the coverage. But even, we've been treating as if the Senate's good, but the things that Cassie was lifting up about the Sentencing Commission, not in the Senate budget either. So we really need to be fighting on all fronts. Whenever I'm giving people a call to action, I always remember, I can't promise you that taking action will lead to the change you want, but I can promise you that not taking action will lead to the status quo you don't want. So I really appreciate all of your commitment to learning about the issues, to taking action, and to fighting to make sure that the programs that invest in public safety, that invest in building people up, that invest in both informing and transforming are funded and supported. We've seen that we can win these fights when we stand together. Thank you for standing with us today. And please join me again to thank Brad Warner, Cassie Larrieux, as well as Jessica Zimnelman from SADO for their amazing work to lead these fights as well. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Cassie. Thank you, Jessica.